Hey guys, welcome back to Founders Doc. My name is Rachel, your friendly startup lawyer, and in this video, we'll be going through the employee share option plan in 7 steps. The first step in implementing a share option plan is to decide which share option plan that you'd like to opt for. Broadly speaking, there are 3 types of employee share option plans. First, a phantom share option plan. Second, the plain vanilla employee share option plan. And third, the share awards. In this video, we'll be focusing purely on the plain vanilla employee share option plan. When implementing an employee share option plan, the first thing that you have to get right is the rules of your ESOP. There are 4 things that you would like to consider. First, the type of shares that are being issued as part of the ESOP. Second, whether secondary share sales are allowed. Third, what happens when an employee leaves the company. And fourth, what happens when the company gets sold. On the first point on what type of shares are being issued, there are broadly speaking 4 types of shares: ordinary shares, preference shares, voting shares, and non-voting shares. As the founder of your company, you get to decide what classes of shares your employees should be entitled to as part of the ESOP. Second, you would like to think about whether or not these shares can be resold in a secondary market. For example, if your company is doing very well, some of your employees may wish to sell their shares before the exit event occurs. If that happens, would you as a founder be okay with that? The third consideration that you'd like to think about when implementing your ESOP is what happens when the employee leaves. Broadly speaking, we can classify them as good leavers as well as bad leavers. Good leavers are employees who have left without cause. For example, if they found a better job offer or they've decided to take a step back in life. And bad leavers are, as the name suggests, employees who may have left the company on bad terms. When this occurs, how would you like to deal with these shares? In the case of a bad leaver, you might like to consider whether or not these shares should be bought back at fair market value, or whether or not these shares should be bought back at a nominal price of $1 or even less. Finally, another consideration that you like to have is how you can get these shares back from a bad leaver. The only way that you can transfer a share from someone back to the company or back to the co-founder is for a person to sign the share transfer form. In instances of bad leavers, it may be difficult to get them to sign a share transfer form. How would you, as a startup, like to handle such situations? Finally, you would like to consider what happens to the ESOP shares when the company achieves an exit. An exit could come in the form of an IPO, or it could come in the form of a trade sale. In such instances, the last thing you'd like to face is for an ex-employee to oppose the sale and stand between you and your exit. Now that you've got your rules of ESOP settled, you would have to implement your ESOP. How do you do that? In 3 simple steps. First, you need to have board resolutions to implement the ESOP. Second, you have to review the constitution as well as existing shareholders agreement to see what kind of consents and approvals are required. Finally, you've also got to pass a members resolution to approve your ESOP. The exact details of your resolution will depend on whether you have to amend your constitution to reflect the new class of ESOP shares. Now that you've got your employee share option plan implemented, what comes next? Well, you have to issue a letter of grant to your employees. The letter of grant typically states terms like the vesting period of the ESOP shares, as well as the exercise price of the ESOP shares, which could either be a nominal price or a discount to the fair market value. Finally, you might like to consider whether a power of attorney language would be applicable in your letter of grant. Now that you've issued your letter of grant, the ESOP shares granted to the employee will be subject to vesting. The vesting period could come in the form of a performance milestone, or it could also be subject to a time vesting period. A common time milestone is 1-year cliff with quarterly, monthly, or yearly vesting periods. So what happens when options vest? Well, employees have the choice of converting their options into shares by signing the exercise notice and submitting it to the company. And they may have to pay a sum of money in order to exercise these options. At this stage, an employee may also wish to consider consulting a tax advisor. So what happens next? Well, shares are issued the same way that all other shares are issued. First, the company secretary will be contacted. Second, she or he may have to carry out certain shareholder KYC checks on the new shareholder. Third, they will then update the electronic register of members of the company filed with ACRA, which stands for the Accounting and Corporate Regulatory Authority of Singapore. Finally, they would then issue the share certificate. As a practical tip, the electronic register of members filed with ACRA may not be able to reflect that these shares are ESOP shares. In these circumstances, it may be important to ensure that the share certificates reflect that these are ESOP shares, and it may also be helpful for the company to keep an internal ledger that shows what shares have been issued as ESOP shares. Well, we hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, remember to like it, share it, and tell us what you like next. Goodbye! Ta-ta!